Hello, and welcome back to It's Bigger Than Biotech. I'm your host, Hriday, Director of True Drug Pharma and a student at USC.
And I'm Vishnu, a software engineer and machine learning and neuroscience researcher, aspiring to be a neurotech entrepreneur, also here at SC.
Yeah, and today we have a very distinguished guest, Dr. Farhad Parhami, and he's a scientist and an entrepreneur at the forefront of oxysterol therapeutics with a PhD in experimental pathology and an MBA from UCLA. He has seamlessly bridged the gap between academic research and biotechnology innovation, and as the founder and the CEO of MAX BioPharma, Dr. Parhami is pioneering the development of novel small molecule oxysterols for treating a range of conditions from bone regeneration to chronic inflammatory diseases. So, in today's episode, we'll explore Dr. Parami's journey from UCLA professor to biotech leader, and we'll delve into groundbreaking work at Max Biopharma, particularly their recent advances in treating metabolic dysfunction associated.
Steatohepatitis.
Oh my God. It's a
Oh
big,
my God.
it's a big word. Okay. So we'll delve into groundbreaking work at Max Biopharma, particularly their recent advances in treating metabolic dysfunction associated steatohepatitis and atherosclerosis. We'll also discuss the challenges of drug development, the potential of oxysterol-based therapeutics, and Dr. Parami's vision for the future of personalized medicine in treating complex diseases. Yeah, it's a great pleasure to have you today.
Thank you guys for the invitation. It's really a pleasure to be here. I think what you're doing is really, really valuable for a lot of people. When I was, in your stage of my career, in school, there was no such a thing as being able to go, on a podcast and interact directly with people that have years of experience in career paths that you may want to follow. This is really great. Congratulations on your success.
Thank you.
So I will share my story. Let's start by me giving you a little background about, why I am where I am, right? And where did I come from? So, as you were mentioning, my career started here at UCLA as an undergrad, and I got my bachelor degree in biology. But from sophomore year, I started working in labs at UCLA. And that is when I really discovered that my passion was in doing research, right? So, drug discovery, studying the molecular and cellular mechanisms that underlie diseases. And it was fantastic, except that I was also on a sort of a pre-med medical school path. Well, the research was going really well. And my advisor at that time, whose lab I was working in, kept telling me that, you know what, you're really good as a scientist. Are you sure you really want to go to medical school? And I kept saying, yes, 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 I do, because my parents want me to go to medical school. Always the case that, I was supposed to go to medical school, even though my father actually started Max Biopharmaceutical Company in Iran, which was one of the first big pharmaceutical companies in that country. And was very successful, but he didn't go to medical school. He went to pharmacy school. So one thing led to another, and I applied to medical school, and I am very glad that I did not get in. I actually took the MCATs and I applied to two schools, USC and UCLA, and I didn't get in. So my advisor pulled me into her office and said, you know what? This is a sign. Why don't you go get a PhD here at UCLA in the Department of Pathology? And then, once you're done with your PhD, then you can always go back to medical school. And I'm like, okay, let's do it. So I applied, got in immediately, and that was the end of medical school. So really the seed of the passion for becoming a scientist was seeded during my college years, sophomore year and beyond. So at that point, finished the PhD and immediately got a faculty position at UCLA and stayed there as faculty for 22 years. Now, why did I start a company? I am sure that's probably a question that you guys might have and your audience might have. And really the reason was twofold. One was that I had enough of academia. And I sort of felt that in order to be able to make sort of the next big step towards my passion, which was drug discovery and drug development, I couldn't really stay in academia. So in 2010, I decided that, maybe that's the path that I want to take. But I also fully realized that as a scientist and an academician who had never done any business training before, there would be no way for me to run a company. So that's how I actually got my MBA through Anderson School. Applied, got in, and finished the MBA program in 2012. And in 2011, I started Max BioPharma.
That is wonderful to hear. I feel like it's similar to yesterday's talk with Phil, where you were on the pre-med track and you wanted to become a doctor, mainly because, of course, you were interested in biology and the impact, but also because of family telling you to become a doctor. But then you follow your own passion and find your own niche in other things related to the sciences, but not exactly being a doctor practicing medicine. So that is super cool. So in the end, you touched upon, starting your company in 2011. So as the founder of Max BioPharma, what was your experience like building the team?
So I was really fortunate because I actually built my team entirely when I was still at UCLA. So just sort of to give you an example of how lucky I was with my team building is that when I was doing oxysterol research, a scientist, a chemist, in San Diego who was working on oxysterols that at that point called me and said, "Oh, you know what? Have you ever thought of building a company around oxysterols?" And I said, "Yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. Why are you asking?" He said, "Well, because I would love to join you. And, I've been working on oxysterols and I think it's great." So one thing led to another. And he was the first member on my team. He was in San Diego. So for about 2 years, he was commuting from San Diego to LA to come and work in my lab and sleeping on his friend's couch 5 days a week. But that was my first hire as director of chemistry. Then I had a person in the Department of Medicine who was a fund manager. So he managed all of our grants. And I was very fond of him. And he was super smart, best fund manager that I had ever had at UCLA during the 22 years. And one day I went into his office and he was very frustrated. And I said, "Well, you know what? If I'm starting a company, would you join me?" And he immediately said, "Yes, I'm going to join you." So he became director of finance and operations. Then a postdoc at UCLA called me and said, "Oh my God, I am so frustrated. I heard about what you're doing and you're starting a company. Do you have a position for me?" I said, "What's your expertise?" He said, "I'm a molecular cellular biologist." I said, "You're hired." So little by little, and then there was an undergrad student actually at UCLA who was working with one of my colleagues. And he was on also a pre-med path. And he was really upset because he wasn't doing well. This was life sciences, biology, chemistry was not his thing. But he came and he started working, volunteering in my lab. And I noticed how meticulous he is and how organized he is and what a good manager he is. So I told him, "You know what? Would you stay here as my lab manager at UCLA and then transition with me into industry, into my company and become my lab manager?" And he said yes. So that was the next hire. So it was always very fortunate. So I really didn't struggle with what other people struggle with, and that is acquiring talent, because I was really surrounded by all of these great people that came, very highly educated and experienced. But I do hear that it can be very frustrating if you're not in a position that I was in. But you always find your way, and through networking and through connections and meeting great young people like yourselves, who come and sort of show their interest in becoming a team member, that we recruit, and the recruitment process goes on.
Right. I know, like, I'm also drawing back from our previous episode with Phil. He also mentioned something very similar. And this is what I said to him as well. Like, in more modern terms, it's all based off of the vibes, right? Like the motivation that, or the inherent passion someone has for that idea. That's how teams are built in startups. It's not based off of money. It's only based off of pure internal motivation to do something and create impact. So yeah, like very similar. I'm seeing a trend here that I feel like could be more larger with startup hiring.
Yeah.
When you do a startup, you really have to have that entrepreneurship passion, right? So not just as the person that starts a company, but also everybody else that comes into a startup has to come in with a sort of a certain mentality that it's not going to be easy, that I'm not just going to be doing one thing. I'm going to have to wear many hats. And at times it's going to be really challenging. All of us who call ourselves entrepreneurs, we all have a lot of scars on our backs, and those scars heal, but they're always there. So as a reminder of how challenging and how difficult it is to be an entrepreneur and then to succeed. A lot of people, especially from academia, think that just because they have run a lab or they have been a postdoc or they have seen their mentors manage their laboratories, that they can actually go and successfully either start a company or be a successful team member in a startup. And that's so not the case. So unfortunately, I have seen a lot of people from academia come and try to do this, try to be entrepreneurs, but they just didn't have the passion and they just didn't have strategy. They didn't have a good business plan and they all failed. So one after another, one after another. And, it's been very fortunate because both myself and everybody that has joined me has had that sort of an entrepreneurial spirit and just ready to fight, fight, fight. Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah, you talked about, I guess, the qualities that you or anyone in the startup space would like to have or should have to succeed, right? And as students, we both want to be founders, we both want to be entrepreneurs as well. And for the viewers as well, do you have any advice for students who want to work in a biotech company, particularly in startups?
Yeah, join a startup company. So I think you probably already know that Ride has joined Metaba and sort of peripherally, because of the collaborations that Max BioPharma and Metaba have, he's also become involved with Max BioPharma and he sees firsthand what it is like to be part of a startup. I think that's the best place to start. You sort of get into the mode, you start learning about everyday life in a startup company, and then you learn whether you want it or not. And that's the only way, because otherwise you just don't know what you're facing. And it's not the same thing at all as when you're in academia. You guys, especially in undergrad, you just have your classes, you get exposed to only so many things, and not necessarily unless you come on a podcast like this one and you learn from people that have done it before and you hear their stories, you just don't get exposed. You don't know what you're facing. And then you suddenly go and you get a job in a startup company and you hate it. So it's as bad as if you go to medical school and you find out that you hate it. And that has happened actually several times with my students. And I was happy to be able to sort of coach them either towards not going to medical school and defying their parents. I shouldn't say that, but now I'm in trouble. Or, just stopping before it gets too late, because you go, you do your third year, fourth year medical school, then you get into internship and residency and you're hating it. And at that point, you're like, oh my God, I have spent so much time. How am I going to stop?
Actually, like I was kind of pondering, right? Like a lot of people talk about what it takes to be in a startup, what qualities you should have. Who is working in a startup not for? Let's ask the inverse of that question, right? Who is it not for? Like if I have this quality, I should never be in a startup. What would you say that is?
That's a really good question, Renee. And I can tell you that the first thing is if you don't like challenge, if you want a 9 to 5 job, startup is not for you. So you got to really be willing to sacrifice everything. I mean, really, your social life, for the most part, you're not going to be able to see your family and friends as much as you would like. So if that's not the kind of lifestyle that you want to have, at least for a while, then that's not for you. So if you are not willing to sort of challenge yourself with learning constantly new tasks, then that's not for you. So it becomes very clear once you immerse yourself in a startup whether or not it is for you. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, yeah, it does. It does. Yeah, so what I get out of it is that startups are not for people who want stability in their career, right? Startups are very
Very
volatile. It's all about volatility and risks. It's high risk, high reward kind of thing, right? At the core of it. Okay, so actually now I want to move slightly back towards when you were in university, your undergrad, your education, right? So back in the day, you were also a professor at UCLA. So how did your academic journey help you in starting your company? And more so, in some ways, the answer is obvious. Of course, it helped you like with the oxysterols and the technical niche knowledge. But is there something that's not seen on the surface that maybe your academic background could have helped you with?
Yeah, for sure. So during 22 years, I think I became a very good judge of character by interacting with hundreds and hundreds of people from students to faculty to people that I had to constantly be dealing with. That was very helpful. And that has helped me throughout. Even today, it's a blessing to be able to interact with somebody, have a few discussions, and immediately know whether that person has chemistry with you or not. Because that's another really important thing. As you in the future, when you build teams, one of the most important things is that there has to be chemistry between you and the people that you're hiring, and also chemistry between those people that you've hired, because teamwork is how you succeed. So together, everyone achieves more, right? So it's a team. So I think, I learned a lot during my academic career of how to judge people in terms of whether or not that they're good or bad people, but whether they have the right kind of chemistry with me. And that actually has allowed me to keep all of the people that I hired in 2011 and 2012 to still be with me without losing any. So that is great. What else did I learn in academia? I think I learned that I don't want to be part of academia forever. That was very helpful for me to be able to sort of determine that entrepreneurship and company building was something that I really wanted to do. And the challenges that you face in academia in terms of grant writing and generating grant money in order to work your lab and all of that stuff, it really makes you develop thick skin. That then you come out, and when you are facing challenges in your company in terms of generating resources and funding and all of that, you already have it in you as an academician. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, you partially mentioned in your response that academia wasn't for you. So, for our viewers who don't know what academia is like, what is academia like? Why wasn't it for you?
So let's see how politically correct I have to be here now. So, okay, so let me tell you something. That's really a good question. So, academia is great, right? Because while you're in academia, you have the freedom to do a lot of different things, right? You're not necessarily creating value the way that a company creates value, right? So you have the ability to do X, Y, Z and get your hands dirty with all different kinds of projects, as long as, of course, you have the funding for it and the resources for it. And if you have the support of your chairman or your person that is sort of your boss, then you can do a lot, right? The good thing about academia. The bad thing about academia is that there is a lot of politics involved. And I think if anyone is in academia and tells you that no, 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 there is no politics involved, that's really not correct. That's not true. So you have to play the politics. And at times it feels very cutthroat. I was only at UCLA, so I can't tell you about other institutions, but this is what I hear from my colleagues who are in other institutions as well. There is not as much willingness to help one another as scientists and faculty members as there is in business. So in industry, which is really fascinating, and I'm still fascinated by it, is how different it is. Leaders and people who are in entrepreneurship roles are really willing to help each other. They don't expect anything. They just want to help you. In academia, it's not like that. So they basically want to fight for being the best in their department, not help you, and even sometimes do bad things to you so that they can stop your progress because they want to actually accelerate in their path. So that's what really turned me off from academia. And then I noticed that it was getting harder and harder to support a drug development project in my lab because money from the NIH comes in, and a lot of times it's not for drug development. You have to sort of be doing very, very, very basic science that sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not even relevant to human health. And it was just getting kind of hard. And I noticed that my spirit was calling me to go and do something different. And that's how Max BioPharma was formed.
Yeah, no, wow. It's very, very insightful answer, actually. It really shows how the industry works from the inside, not something very surface level for sure. Yeah, very interesting. So when you were at UCLA, were there any resources that you feel like really helped you in your career, or like any resources you wished you used while you were in university or your undergrad that could have helped you out a lot?
I think I was very fortunate because I was able to tap into almost every resource that there was. So that's really important for you to be able to identify resources that there are for you, because there's a lot. There's a lot of resources out there for students to tap into, from their career centers to just, networking, going to networking events, and all sorts of different resources. So I was very fortunate because I could tap into all of that. Was there anything that I wish there was that I could actually tap into? Yes. So when I was at UCLA as an undergrad, there was no programs for undergrads who wanted to learn about entrepreneurship. None, zero. So now, of course, there is, right? So now Marshall School at USC has a lot of programs for undergrads. Christian School at UCLA has a lot of programs for undergrads. So you can really get exposed to that. So I wish that there was a resource like that. And then when I started my company, there was nobody really to help me with what am I doing? What am I supposed to be doing as I am building my company? If I hadn't gone to business school and if I hadn't gotten an MBA, I wouldn't even know what it takes to have a competitive strategy for your company. So that's not a small thing, right? So and there was really nobody to help me with that. One of the great things that I have in my relationship with Phil, who you interviewed yesterday, is that I'm able to really share with him everything that I went through as I built Max Biopharma in 2011 to now that he's building his young startup company so that he doesn't have to really make all of the mistakes that I made. I learned from mistakes. That's why I think part of the reason why he is able to accelerate so much faster because of the relationships that he has with me and with other people like myself who are willing to help him and share their insights and experiences with him.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, it's very, very, again, insightful answer in terms of learning from your past experience. And you mentioned like you took part in almost every opportunity that was given to you, like all the resources, right? So, firstly, like I have a two-parter here. So firstly, it's that how did you find all these resources in the first place? Because I know as students, it's really tough to find them in the first place. And second was that you also mentioned you did your PhD and MBA. So let's just start off with the first one.
Okay. What's the first question?
The first question is, so how did you find all these resources you took advantage of? Because as students, it's tough. Yeah.
So, a lot of it takes being curious and being involved with different organizations. I had a big involvement in our student government at UCLA, and then I was president of the Iranian Students Group at UCLA for a few years, and that actually gave me the ability to connect with a lot of different organizations and learn from those organizations what resources there are available. And then also, I always had a very good relationship with my professors, and they would open up a lot of resources in terms of where do I go to learn about this, where do I go to learn about that. So you just have to be curious. You just have to be curious and be willing to go out there, talk to people, talk to everybody, and you learn from them what is and is not available to you, because there's a lot available. There's a lot. And if you get sort of tunnel visioned and you just go to school and you just study, you go to the library or wherever, and all you do is just study, study, study for your midterms and your finals, you're not going to find all of those resources. You got to be out there exploring. That's the only way.
Definitely. I mean, yeah, again, that's like so many professionals have mentioned talk to your professors. It's absolutely like I feel like again, I'm seeing another trend talking to all these professionals in industry. Professors are one of the most underutilized resources on campus and like the most valuable ones too. So yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. Very insightful. Right now, we're going to move on to the second part, the very loaded question is that
Uh-oh.
you did an MBA and a PhD.
Yeah.
So you know the insides of who a PhD might be for versus who a MBA might be for, and what career paths do they open up in the healthcare, biotech, pharma industry?
Okay, so in general, the reason to get an MBA is twofold, right? I mean, there are other reasons too, but the main reasons is that either you want to learn how to navigate the business world, right? You will not learn everything in your program, but at least you learn the basics. As a scientist, I never was exposed to things like finance, accounting, strategy, marketing. And the only way that I could actually learn at that stage of my career was to get an MBA. right? A lot of people actually now it's becoming more and more of a trend of going to business school after you've had several years of experience in the workforce. And actually, that's what I and a lot of people like myself recommend. At some point, I was giving lectures at Anderson School on entrepreneurship and career development, and that's what I was always tell the students, and especially the undergrads, that if you want to get an MBA, do it. It's a great idea, but get some work experience first, and then jump into an MBA program. So that's sort of one reason why you want to get an MBA. Second reason that you may want to get an MBA is if you are on a trajectory, right? And you have a job already in a company, and there is no way to go and take the next steps up, right? Your trajectory up. You will not get a promotion unless you have an MBA. And a lot of companies actually promote that and even fund it. They even pay for it. And I think that's another major reason why people do get an MBA.
And what about specifically a PhD then? So an MBA is for someone who wants to get exposure to the business background. Even though they won't get all of it, they'll get the basics, and then they have to just go out and learn themselves. Or for someone who already has a job and wants to kind of get that credibility to their name and just increment their position, like I have an MBA behind me. So, right? But like for a PhD, who is a PhD for?
So a PhD is for somebody, either you're passionate about teaching, right? So a lot of people who teach have a professional degree, right? They have, especially in life sciences, at higher institutions like universities, not junior colleges, but universities, almost always you need to have a PhD in order to teach. So that's one reason. The second reason is that I found out that by getting a PhD in a good lab, and my late mentor, actually, I owe her almost everything, all of my success for being able to transition from one field to another. My career started as a vascular biologist, lipid biologist, stem cell biologist. Then I had to learn about cancer biology and then bone biology. And the reason for that was that I got a really well-rounded education during my PhD degree, which I would not have gotten if I hadn't gone through that PhD degree. So that PhD program. So I think it's good to have a PhD, but let me now step back and tell you that you don't necessarily have to have an MBA in order to succeed in your company building efforts or in business in general. And also, you don't necessarily have to have a PhD in order to be a really great, successful scientist. A lot of scientists that have actually done a lot of great discoveries have not been PhDs. So they have been MDs, they have had master's degrees, but they have had, of course, some training, in science, but they necessarily did not have a PhD degree. And the same thing with an MBA. Phil and I always have this discussion that I think the MBA that he's getting now, which we call Founders MBA, is as good, it seems, as the MBA that I got with, 2 years of brutal training, at Anderson School and $180,000 in loans. It's almost the same, but, he is managing getting the experience that he needs just by being in the trenches for Metaba, and also by interacting with people who have MBAs and who've done, this kind of work and learning from them. So
that makes a lot of sense. So we talked about your past and about doing your PhD and doing your MBA, who it's suited for, who it's not. Let's talk about the future. As the president and CEO of MAX BioPharma, what excites you most about the future of your company, your role in it, and the general space that you're in?
So what excites me most is seeing what I started really 14 years ago flourish and grow the way that we've grown. So as Renee was saying, earlier in the beginning, we started and we pioneered a whole new field of research of oxysterol therapeutics, right? So seeing that and seeing the future of this platform technology is what I am most excited about, because we started by having one compound, one sort of drug candidate that could stimulate bone formation by targeting mesenchymal stem cells, a type of stem cells that makes osteoblasts that make bone. That's what we had. Now we have at least a dozen different programs under our belt for all of these different indications therapeutic areas that shows you how strong the platform is and how much potential the platform has. That's the most exciting thing. As a scientist, I think the biggest dream of any scientist is to make a discovery that can have such a huge impact. And this is going to go on for many, many, many more years. So there was a time that I would get up in scientific conferences and talk about oxysterols as drug candidates. I was laughed at. You know why? Because oxysterols for decades were always thought to be bad actors in terms of creating disease. Well, that did not seem to be the case when we started to tweak with the structures of these compounds and seeing that, oh my God, even the smallest change in the structure of a compound can make an activator of a pathway an inhibitor of that pathway. So that was a big deal. And I think it's been very fortunate for myself to be able to do this, my team to be able to do this, and seeing the future as being, incredibly huge for us and for others. When we started this path of oxysterol therapeutics, nobody was looking at oxysterols as drug targets. Now there are at least 5 companies that are developing naturally occurring oxysterols as drug candidates for a number of indications, including a disease that we're after, the fatty liver or MASH. So that's super exciting.
Yeah. Very cool. So you talked about oxysterol therapy, right? And your future of the company. But what I've understood through talking to lots of other startup founders is that a lot of it depends on a founder's mindset too, especially because biotechnology as a space is like, even though it's rapidly growing, it's still a bit slow. It takes years to develop, certain drugs, etc. How are you as a person handling with that? What is your internal motivation?
Well, the internal motivation is to be able to make a big change, right? Humanity. I want to be able to, when I'm done with my career, I want to look back and be able to say that, hey, you know what? We are now able to have a therapy for pancreatic cancer because of what my team and I did. So that's the biggest motivation, right? And I'm not going to lie to you. Financial gains is also another motivation. So I know in academia, that line of thinking is always poo-pooed. It's like, no, 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 no. You're not a serious scientist if you want to make money out of what you discover. I never liked that idea. So that's another motivation, of being able to build something that is going to also add to your financial success.
Wonderful. And because you're in the space of biotech startups, over the next decade, particularly for companies focusing on novel small molecule platforms, how do you think the landscape will pan out?
Yeah, I think the landscape is going to pan out in 2 ways. One is we're understanding that some of the most difficult diseases to treat have been difficult to treat because we didn't know the exact mechanism, right, of pathogenesis of the disease. So, for example, the fatty liver disease, MASH, there were dozens and dozens of therapeutic drug candidates that went into clinic and they all failed. And the reason that they failed is that we didn't know how complex the pathogenesis of this disease is. So many hits that result in the eventual, development of the disease. And by targeting just one of these hits, one of these sort of dysregulated pathways, you really cannot make a big difference in slowing down the disease or preventing the disease. So I think the more we understand about different diseases and the complexity of different diseases, the better our ability is going to be to design the next family of compounds or the next, drugs that would be more capable of treating those diseases. Number one. Number two, you've heard this from everybody else probably, that precision medicine is going to be really key to our ability to treat different patients differently. Now, if I have a certain cancer, doesn't mean that a therapy that works for somebody else who has the same cancer is going to work on me. Why? Because the way that these cancers, for example, or even the way that metabolic disease develops can be very different in different people. And unless we know what is wrong that's causing the disease in that certain person or in that population, we're not going to be able to apply the best medicines for it. So precision medicine is going to be key. The third thing, I said it's two, but the third thing is for us to be able to better diagnose the disease and the prognosis of the disease based on the therapy that you're giving the patient. Right now, a lot of prognosis assessment of whether or not a therapy is working is through invasive modes, right? So for fatty liver, you have to do a liver biopsy, which is pretty invasive and pretty uncomfortable. But as we develop better diagnostic markers, better prognostic markers, we're going to get better and better and better in terms of applying the right kind of therapies. And your guest yesterday, Phil, is that's one of the things that he's doing. And that is coming up with better ways, better markers for determining whether a patient is in fact responding positively to a drug, whether a patient at an early stage of a disease is in fact going to progress to the next more complicated stage of the disease. And all of these things, by finding biomarkers in your circulation, in your plasma, you'll be able to do a much better job of treating people. So I think that's the future.
All right, definitely. So you mentioned a few key trends there. But I feel like they all lead to a bigger macro trend that I see, which is personalized medicine. Every single medicine is just made for that one person specifically, and it'll only work for that person really well. And I feel like, yeah, that's what you said. Diagnostic tools are necessary. And those diagnostic tools are necessary because you need to find the markers that would work specifically for that person. So, yeah, that's a trend. And yeah, not a lot of people have said it yet. So, yeah, thank you for introducing the concept to our viewers. Yeah.
So, yeah, again, thank you so much for explaining what you think of the future of biotech and using your experience to explain it and everything. So, given your experience in both academia and industry, what advice would you give specifically to scientists who are considering the transition from academia or doing their PhD? Industry, of course, specifically startups, but anything in biotechnology or biopharmaceuticals.
I would highly recommend that you do an internship. Definitely get exposed. There are a lot of companies, both startup and non-startup, that have the ability to take you on and sort of bring you on board on
Yeah.
volunteer basis, most of them, and then you see what it's all about to be in industry. It's not for everybody, for two reasons. One is that you have to have a certain mindset in order to be in a non-academic environment. And I see this all the time, even now as I interact with people who are in industry, quote unquote, startup, they just don't have that mindset. It's a very, very different mindset. Value creation in academia is very different than value creation in a business. You come out of in academia, your success is really judged by the number of papers that you publish and the quality of the journals that you publish your papers in, right? When you come out of academia, that is no longer as important. Yeah, it's still great for a company to publish a paper in Science and Nature. It's wonderful, but that's not what creates value. What creates value is whether or not you're going to be able to go as fast as possible from bench to bedside. How do you go from having a preclinical compound to putting it into a human being, testing it out in clinical trials, which is what adds value? In a startup company, if you're a preclinical company, your value is only so much. How do you get that preclinical program into clinic so that now your company becomes a clinical company, not a preclinical company? That's where valuation of your company goes back. The value creation is very different in academia versus in industry. And a lot of people who come out of academia are stuck with how do we judge success? How do we create value? And they think that it's the same thing, and it's not. It's very, very different. The other thing that's very, very different is the way that you run an academic lab is, again, very different than how you run a startup company in the industry. So, and the only reason that you'll see the differences and feel and experience the differences is by being in it and getting, firsthand exposure. And I am sure that Ride can share some
Yeah.
experiences with you on that as he has been working with us.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's definitely a very unique experience, I must say. I've seen a lot of tech startups too and how they start, and I see a lot of similarities in some ways, even though two different industries, the way they start off is so similar, so scrappy, but like so strategic. in everything they think of. So yeah, I mean, it's an absolute honor with working with you guys, but also like learning from you guys. It's
Great.
phenomenal. So now we're going to move on to our next section and the final one at that. It's a rapid fire question round. So we're just going to ask you a question and you can answer within a sentence to or a word, up to you. So yeah, I'll just start you off with our first question is what topic in the biotech pharmaceutical industry do you love the most?
Precision medicine.
Perfect. And you talked about this already. And so now the next question is, what is a fun fact regarding your role? The sub question being, what do you love about your role?
What I love about my role is that I get to wear a lot of hats, right? And as you can see, I'm bald. So having a lot of hats and having to wear a lot of hats is a good thing. Being a little bit more serious. I know this is rapid fire, but
No, no,
I just love the fact that I have to be so dynamic always, all the time, dealing with so many different things, putting out so many different fires. That's what excites me.
okay, and on the other side of that question, what do you dislike about it?
What do I dislike about the role is that I have to be very, very strategic in terms of what path we take. We can't do everything. We have to focus. So having constantly to be reminded that we have to focus.
Definitely. Very, very understandable and very well said too. Like you have to learn how to say no to things to excel in the things you're already doing. So very insightful. Okay, what is the interesting networking story that taught you a lot?
All right. I'll give you two examples. One sort of professional and um, one personal. And I'm a big promoter of networking, right? So I network like crazy all the time. I think there's a lot of benefit into networking because you never know who you're going to meet, what you're going to learn. So a very recent thing that happened at a networking event is that I was speaking to this gentleman who is a big shot in the scientific field, in the scientific community. And he happened to just say one thing that started me on this new path of looking at our compounds for a very different thing. So, and what he said was that fibrosis of organs is very much something that happens with aging, right? And fibrosis is highly associated with diseases of aging. And the main driver of fibrosis in aging is TGF beta, which is this factor that we've been working with for a long time because we want to inhibit TGF beta signaling in diseases that are fibrotic. So little I knew that that is really important in aging, senescence, and longevity. So I came back having networked with this one individual, which I probably would have never interacted with if I hadn't gone to this networking event. And we started an entire new area of research at Max BioPharma. And that is opening doors for us like crazy because longevity, as you probably know, is sort of the next big thing. So that's sort of the professional networking. And then the sort of the personal networking part is, again, you never know who you're going to meet, right? It's not always going to be somebody that's going to be scientifically or business-wise important to you. I met Phil at a networking event. This was a Merck Biocom sort of sponsored networking event. And at the event, we didn't even talk. After the event, during the after party networking, we started a conversation and we formed this incredible friendship that has now developed into a professional friendship as well, right? So I think the power of networking is just immense in so many different ways.
Right.
So go out there and network.
Yeah, definitely. Very, very valuable, very interesting too. But I just want to understand, like, as a student, what is the best place to network? Like, where should I go to network? Because professionally, like, it's very different because, these networking events have such a high price tag sometimes to get in. So, like, as students, where should we go and network with professionals?
Okay. So I think one of the best places to go as students in undergrad is your career development centers. And a lot of times they have a lot of information on networking events that are free to students. So that's one. Number two is if it depends on which field do you want to network in, right? If you want to go to some industry networking events, there are so many of them around here in the LA area that we can always introduce you to, talking to people like myself or to Phil or others who are in this field, we can guide you into those directions. There are many organizations in LA, Southern California, that are promoting, for example, networking events because LA is becoming the next big hub for biotech. right? And biopharma, and they are constantly putting networking events together. If you're into AI, there are huge networking events almost weekly, if not several times a week, all around town. And they're all free that you can just go to and mingle and meet people.
Great.
There is no shortage of networking events in LA.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually really good resource, the Career Center. I personally have never used it before, but it's because I did not know they have these kind of services as well. So I will go check it out for sure. My next question to you is, what is your favorite source of biotech healthcare related information?
There's a lot. There isn't just one favorite.
Okay,
So,
so
well, it's hard to sort of give you the top five
yeah.
because there are so many scientific journals, business journals. Those are sort of where I also keep track of press releases in my field. So that's another area. It's really good to sort of keep track of what's going on in your field. But you just have to constantly be reading and exploring.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, a lot of professionals mention like websites like Fear Biopharma for biotech related news. Like some people say the people are the best source of
For
news.
sure.
There's so many sources, and yeah, you've added one very valuable one as well. So thank you for that. And my last question to you, last question of the episode, the Big Bang. So no pressure on this. What is a wise quote that has stuck with you over the years?
Okay. Again, I'll give you two. How's that?
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the quotes that has always resonated with me, and I have used this with my students in my lab, in academia, is something that is probably one of the best known quotes out there. And it's by Albert Einstein. And you probably can guess what it is, right? Doing something over and over again and expecting the same result. That's the definition of insanity. So the reason that I always use this with my students was that PhD students or postdocs is that you can't just do the same experiment again and again using the same methods and expect that the result is going to be different. If you're looking for a different result, you're going to have to change something, right? So that's something that actually I learned. I heard that quote the first time in junior high as I was going through a stage of my development that I was doing the same thing over and over and over again, and I wasn't getting what I wanted to. And eventually, one of my teachers told me about this Albert Einstein quote. So that was one. And then another quote that I actually recently finally dug up who it is from, and there's still some, it's not quite clear if that's the source or not. And I actually have this on a piece of stone that's sort of written on this stone on my bedroom wall because it's a really good reminder of what life is all about. And that is, so the quote says that life is not measured by the number of breaths we take, but by the moments that take our breath away. And I think that is such a beautiful quote. And it's so true because we can get lost in terms of how we value our lives and how, well we're doing or not doing. And this is so it seems that this is by Vicky Corona. And she was a prolific author, always writing about dance and dancing. And this is in one of her books about Tahitian choreography. And you can actually look it up, Tahitian choreography by Vicky Corona. So this is my second favorite.
Yeah,
How's
very
that?
yeah, wow. Very, very deep quote. Yeah, still thinking about it. So yeah, that's really nice, very insightful as well. So yeah, that was absolutely phenomenal. Thank you so much for coming, Dr.
Of
Farhad.
course. So I have a question for you guys. If you so tell me about
Sure,
the
sure.
paths that you guys are following, especially, I know a little bit about Rene already
Yeah.
because we've been sort of talking to him about his future. But Vishnu, how about you?
Yeah, so right now, I'm very focused on data science and software engineering as a skill. My degree consists of both hardware and software stuff. So I'm computer engineering and computer science. In the future, what I want to do is neurotechnology. So I see myself building a company around building like hardware and software systems to mitigate the effects of neurological disorders like ataxia and Parkinson's disease. So I'm in like a neurotechnology lab right now, and I plan to work in neurotechnology companies before starting my own. So yeah, that's my North Star. I feel like I'm kind of similar to you in the sense that I really want impact in the world, and I want to see someone who has ataxia or has like these disorders, they can live lives like more freely through things that I do. I think that is what I really care about. And yeah, that's why I'm doing everything that I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And Renee, after all of this conversation that we had today, and maybe conversations similar to what we had today with others, why do you think that you are a good entrepreneur?
I feel like I personally would not kind of give myself that honor of saying I'm a great entrepreneur. I'm not yet. I have a lot of learning to do, but I take it one step at a time, and I feel like that's what makes me more grounded in what I want to do and very realistic in what I want to do. I have a broad goal. I want to get there, but like it's almost like a very overwhelming goal, just for the viewers as well. So my vision at the end of the day, when I'm on, like I've thought about this for a while. On my deathbed, I want to be able to impact the global pharmaceutical industry in such a big way that I'm recognized, right? So it's a very overwhelming step. How do you impact the industry in such a major way? But like, yeah, I'm just taking it step by step, learning about the industry, learning about the problems, trying to make a meaningful way to fix an industry that is so important to everyone and, and indirectly impacting millions, maybe billions of lives. So I feel like that's my path, and taking one step at a time, being realistic about it makes me kind of more of a good entrepreneur, I guess. Not great, but good.
That's awesome. Congrats to both of you.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Farhad.
you.
Thank you for asking us questions.
Yeah,
They
Yeah, of
really,
course.
yeah, really
I
caught
had
us
to
off
return the favor.
yeah, of course.
they caught us off guard with that one, but thank you
Yeah.
so much. Yeah. So again, thank you for coming on. It's been a very, very, very insightful conversation.
Mhm.
Really understanding the depths of the industry of academia. The little bit of insider information you gave us. It's great. And also like thank you for sharing your expertise in going through the PhD and an MBA, and also talking about oxysterols. And also for our viewers, if you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with anyone interested in the future of biotech and pharmaceuticals. You can also follow It's Bigger Than Biotech on LinkedIn, Instagram, Apple Podcast, and Spotify. And again, Dr. Farhad, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks for the invitation.